Imagine holding money in your hand that you could actually eat. Not metaphorically, literally. For the Aztec civilization, this wasn't imagination. It was everyday life. A single cacao bean could buy you a tamale. 100 beans? A slave. And if you were caught counterfeiting these precious seeds by filling empty pods with mud? Death. Today, we consume over 7 million tons of chocolate annually. That's roughly the weight of 10 Empire State Buildings. But how did a bitter ceremonial drink reserved for warriors and nobility transform into the sweet treat sitting in your pantry right now? This is the story of chocolate, the food that built empires, fueled revolutions, and changed the world forever. Act 1. The Divine Gift. Our story begins in the steamy rainforests of Central America around 1500 BCE. The Olmec civilization, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, discovered something extraordinary growing in the shade of larger trees, the cacao plant, Theobroma cacao. And yes, that Latin name literally means food of the gods. They knew what they had. But here's where it gets weird. Unlike most fruits that grow on branches, cacao pods sprout directly from the trunk, like some kind of botanical glitch in the matrix. Each pod, roughly the size of a football, contains 20 to 40 seeds swimming in a sweet, white pulp. Those seeds? That's chocolate. Well, potentially. The Olmecs figured out that if you fermented these bitter seeds for several days, dried them in the sun, roasted them, and ground them into a paste, you could create something powerful. They mixed this paste with water, chili peppers, and sometimes corn to create xocolotl, the ancestor of hot chocolate, though you wouldn't recognize it. This wasn't the creamy, sweet beverage we know today. Imagine a bitter, spicy, room-temperature drink with a layer of foam on top. The foam was actually the most prized part. The ancient Mesoamericans would pour the liquid from one vessel to another from a great height, specifically to create that frothy layer. No foam? You were doing it wrong. When the Maya inherited cacao culture from the Olmecs, they elevated it to divine status. Cacao appeared in their creation myth. Their gods bled cacao. They buried their nobility with cylindrical vessels filled with chocolate to sustain them in the afterlife. And their word for cacao, cacao, appeared more frequently in Mayan writing than nearly any other word. The sacred Mayan ball game, where players risked their lives, was fueled by chocolate. Winners drank it. Sometimes losers died for it. This wasn't just a beverage. This was liquid power, liquid spirituality, liquid life itself. But it was the Aztecs who truly understood chocolate's value in the most practical sense, as money. Act 2. The Currency of Empires. By the 1400s, the Aztec Empire controlled the most powerful civilization in Mesoamerica. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was home to over 200,000 people, larger than any European city at the time. And the currency that made this empire run? Cacao beans. The Aztec price list reads like something from a fantasy novel. 1 cacao bean, 1 large tomato, 3 beans, a fresh avocado, 10 beans, a rabbit for dinner, 100 beans, a male slave, a turkey, 20 to 30 beans, depending on the season. This wasn't symbolic money. These beans held genuine purchasing power across the entire empire. And where there's money, there's crime. Counterfeiters would carefully open cacao pods, remove the valuable beans, fill the shells with dirt or sand, and reseal them. The punishment if caught? Execution. The Aztecs didn't mess around when it came to monetary policy. The Emperor Montezuma II allegedly consumed 50 cups of chocolate daily, served in golden goblets that were used once and then thrown into the lake. His personal warehouse stored nearly 1 billion cacao beans. That's not just wealth. That's build a pyramid out of money levels of wealth. But the Aztecs didn't just hoard chocolate, they weaponized it. Warriors drank it before battle for endurance. Nobility consumed it to demonstrate status. And like the Maya before them, they believed it contained mystical properties that connected the physical and spiritual worlds. Then, in 1519, everything changed. Hernán Cortés and his Spanish conquistadors arrived on the shores of Mexico. They came seeking gold. What they found would prove even more valuable. Act 3. The European Transformation. When Cortés first tasted xocolotl, he reportedly hated it. Too bitter, too spicy, too strange. But he was a businessman, and he recognized value when he saw it. If the Aztecs treated these beans like gold, there had to be something there. By the 1520s, cacao beans were crossing the Atlantic to Spain. But the bitter drink still wasn't winning fans in European courts. The Spanish needed to adapt the recipe for European palates. Here's where it gets interesting. Spanish monks, the Silicon Valley innovators of their day, started experimenting. They removed the chili peppers, they heated the drink, and most importantly, they added something the Aztecs never had access to: sugar. This was the pivotal moment. Hot chocolate with sugar wasn't just different, it was revelatory. Suddenly, chocolate became Spain's most guarded secret. For nearly a century, Spain maintained a monopoly on chocolate, and sharing the recipe with other European nations was considered treason. But secrets that delicious can't stay hidden forever. By the 1600s, chocolate had escaped Spain's borders. It spread to Italy through royal marriages, to France through the Spanish princess Maria Theresa, and to England where chocolate houses became the sophisticated alternative to taverns. These chocolate houses were where ideas mixed as smoothly as the drinks. Politicians debated. Scientists theorized. Artists created. The intellectual revolution of the Enlightenment was, quite literally, fueled by chocolate. Doctors prescribed it as medicine. Some claimed it cured smallpox. Others said it aided digestion or enhanced fertility. The Pope even had to rule on whether drinking chocolate broke fasting rules. His decision? Liquidum non frangit. Jejunum. Liquids don't break the fast. Chocolate was officially blessed. But there's a darker chapter we can't ignore. As demand for chocolate exploded across Europe, production needed to scale. The solution was brutal: enslaved labor on Caribbean and South American plantations. The sweet treat enjoyed in European salons was harvested by people in chains. This shadow would hang over chocolate production for centuries, and in some parts of the world, that darkness hasn't fully lifted even today. Act 4. The Industrial Revolution. For centuries, chocolate remained a beverage, thick, oily, and expensive. Then came the 1800s, and everything changed. The Industrial Revolution didn't just transform textiles and steel, it completely reinvented chocolate. In 1828, Dutch chemist Coenraad van Houten invented the cocoa press. This machine could squeeze most of the cocoa butter out of roasted cacao beans, leaving behind a dry powder. For the first time, you could make chocolate that wasn't thick and oily. Van Houten's process made chocolate more affordable and easier to prepare. The era of mass chocolate consumption had begun, but the real revolution happened in England. In 1847, J.S. Fry and Sons discovered that if you took cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and sugar and combined them in just the right way, you could create something completely new: solid chocolate that you could eat with your hands. The first chocolate bar was born. The Cadbury family, Quakers who believed in social reform, turned chocolate into big business. They built factories with good working conditions, created company towns with houses and schools, and turned chocolate from an aristocratic luxury into something working-class families could afford. Their dairy milk bar, launched in 1905, would become the UK's best-selling chocolate. Across the continent in Switzerland, Rodolphe Lindt invented the conching machine in 1879. This device stirred chocolate continuously for hours or even days, creating a smooth, melt-in-your-mouth texture that had never existed before. This was the chocolate texture we recognize today. Silky, luxurious, perfect. Meanwhile, in America, a caramel maker named Milton Hershey had a vision: chocolate for everyone. Not just the rich, not just special occasions, everyday chocolate. In 1900, he launched the Hershey bar, priced so affordably that every American could buy one. He built an entire town, Hershey, Pennsylvania, around his factory, complete with schools, parks, and a streetlight shaped like chocolate kisses. When World War I broke out, chocolate went to war. Armies included chocolate bars in soldier rations for quick energy. Hershey's Ration D bar was designed to taste just good enough that soldiers would only eat it if they were truly desperate. 4 ounces of chocolate meant to sustain a man for a day. Over 3 billion D bars were produced during World War II. An entire generation of soldiers returned home with a chocolate habit. ACT 5. The modern chocolate world. Today, the chocolate industry is worth over $130 billion annually. We consume it in forms the Aztecs never imagined: bars, chips, spreads, drinks, ice cream, beauty products, even chocolate-scented candles. Mars, Nestlé, Hershey, Ferrero, Mondelez. 5 companies control nearly 60% of all chocolate sold on Earth. The Snickers bar alone generates over $2 billion in sales every year. That's more than the GDP of some countries. But here's what most people don't know. Roughly 70% of the world's cacao now comes from West Africa, particularly Ivory Coast and Ghana. The plant that originated in Central America found its most productive home across the Atlantic Ocean. It's a strange historical loop. Cacao traveled to Africa, and much of it returns to be processed in the countries that first colonized the lands where it grew. And that darker shadow we mentioned earlier. It's still here. Child labor remains a significant problem in cacao production. Despite decades of promises from major chocolate companies, hundreds of thousands of children still work in hazardous conditions on cacao farms. When you buy chocolate, you're not just buying a treat. You're participating in a global supply chain with real moral implications. But there's hope. Fair trade certification, direct trade relationships, and craft chocolate makers are creating more ethical alternatives. Companies like Theo Chocolate and Alter Eco are proving you can produce excellent chocolate while paying farmers fairly and ensuring no child labor in the supply chain. We're also experiencing a chocolate renaissance. The craft chocolate movement, bean-to-bar makers, is exploding. These chocolatiers are doing what winemakers do, highlighting terroir, single origins, specific cacao varieties. A chocolate bar from Peruvian cacao tastes different from one from Madagascar, which tastes different from one from Venezuela. We're learning that chocolate isn't one flavor, it's thousands, and scientists are now working to secure chocolate's future. Climate change threatens cacao production. The trees are finicky, requiring specific conditions. Researchers are developing disease-resistant varieties and studying ancient cacao genetics to create plants that can survive warmer temperatures. Because imagine a world without chocolate. Actually, don't. It's too terrible. From sacred beverage to currency, from luxury to everyday indulgence, chocolate has been with humanity for over 3,000 years. It's fueled empires, financed conquests, sweetened revolutions, and connected cultures across continents. The Aztecs called it the food of the gods. They weren't wrong. What other food has held such power over human civilization? What other ingredient has been money, medicine, ritual, pleasure, and art all at once? Today, a child biting into a chocolate bar in Tokyo, a baker in Paris crafting a chocolate soufflé, a grandmother in Mexico stirring traditional champurrado, they're all part of the same story that began when an Olmec farmer first cracked open a strange pod growing from a tree trunk. Chocolate's journey isn't over. As we face questions about sustainability, ethics, and environmental change, chocolate will evolve once more. But one thing is certain: humanity's love affair with these fermented, roasted seeds isn't ending anytime soon. Because in the end, chocolate isn't just about taste. It's about history, connection, transformation. The story of how something bitter becomes sweet, how something rare becomes universal, how something divine becomes human. That's the magic of chocolate. And that magic, it's as real now as it was 3,000 years ago.